Welcome back to the podcast. Today's topic is one that I am very passionate about, but I haven't talked about directly on this podcast very much, and I think you'll know what I mean in just a minute when we get into it. But before we get started, I wanted to take a minute and ask if you have been enjoying this podcast or if you know someone who might enjoy the podcast, if you could please share it with them, and if you could rate and review and subscribe wherever you're listening on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on YouTube. It would really mean a lot, and it's how this podcast gets discovered by new listeners. So please just take a moment and do that wherever you are. And when you're ready, we can dive into the nutrition of pasture-raised pork. I've talked a lot on this podcast about why I raise pigs, how I raise pigs, the beauty of raising pigs, the delicious meat, but I haven't really gotten directly into the nutritional profile of pork, especially how it compares to the nutritional profile of grass-fed and finished beef or grass-fed and finished lamb, because there's this myth, I'll call it a myth, that pork is unhealthy. Really, what that means is that pork raised in confined animal feeding operations, also known as factory farms, that kind of pork is unhealthy. That kind of pork has given pork a bad name, but there's a reason why humans have raised pigs for centuries for food, and that's because it's actually incredibly nutritious. And it's a nutritious meat that is very different from beef and lamb, and we'll go into some of the nitty-gritty today. To start, let's talk about what is pasture-raised pork. Pasture-raised pork, first and foremost, comes from pigs who are raised outdoors. That sounds really elementary, but 90%, if not 95, 99% of the pork in this country, in the United States, is raised indoors. So already we're dealing with something really different and really radical. Pastured pork is raised outside. It's also raised on pasture, meaning that they're eating grasses, they're eating forbs, they're eating all kinds of plants in addition to a grain ration, although some people do not provide that. We do. We provide a barley ration, sometimes with milk, sometimes with buckwheat, sometimes with eggs, but always with barley, always with alfalfa from the pasture. Here at Late Bloomer Ranch, pasture raised means that we utilize management-intensive grazing practices. So we're rotating our animals on pasture multiple times each week during the season. But if you're working with a different purveyor, you may want to ask them what pasture-raised means to them, because there is no set standard for how frequently animals are moved on pasture in order to be called pasture-raised. These pigs are typically heritage breeds. I work with Berkshire, Maishan, a little large black, a little red wattle, and some Tamworth. We're always improving our cross. We're always trying to find that balance to get the right carcass size, the right grow out, and especially the right flavor and the right nutrition. And we like all of our animals to really thrive in our environment. So we're always selecting for the animals that are going to do best here. You can't take a commercial breed that would do well in a confined animal feeding operation and put them on the pasture that we have here at Late Bloomer Ranch and expect them to perform and expect them to do well. That's just where the rubber meets the road. Certain genetics perform better in different environments, and we're always selecting for the genetics that do well here. So for the purposes of this conversation and the nutrition facts that we're going to talk about, we're talking about these heritage breeds. We are also talking about a mix of forage, alfalfa, barley like we talked about, and we're not talking about corn or soy. We're not talking about GMOs. We're not talking about synthetic herbicides or fertilizers. We're not talking about pharmaceuticals or hormones added. All of those things are more conventional pork. And those things, the corn, the soy, the pharmaceuticals, that's what contributes to so many of the unhealthy fats and health outcomes from conventional pork. So just in a definition of terms, the nutrition facts that I'm talking about are pertaining to the way that we raise pork here at Late Bloomer Ranch. So I thought it would be useful to talk about a pork chop. Everybody knows about a pork chop. For this example, I'm going to use an 8-ounce pork chop. a bone-in pork chop from Late Bloomer Ranch. I like to eat mine with the fat cap on. I find the fat to be incredibly satiating, but I'll also throw out some nutrition facts if you want to leave the fat cap off. But I think by the end of this segment, you might be more interested in keeping the fat cap next time you cook a pork chop. So let's start with protein. One 8-ounce pork chop has 51 grams of protein, just about. Believe it or not, that's 100% of the protein recommended from the FDA. I personally eat about 3 times that amount of protein, but if you are getting your nutrition facts from the government and that's who you're looking for your nutritional guidance, you can meet 100% of your daily protein requirements just by eating one 8-ounce pork chop that's raised properly. Calories, between 350 and 380 calories if you're eating it with the fat cap on. If you aren't eating the fat cap and you're trying to eat as little fat as possible, it could be as few as 265 or 275 calories for that 8-ounce pork chop and those 51 grams of protein. Fat, again, I love eating the fat cap. So for me, it's 12 to 15 grams of fat. If you're not going to eat the fat cap, it's more like 6 grams of fat. And this is a really clean fat. This is a low polyunsaturated fat, and it's not greasy. It doesn't feel like deep fryer fat. So I always eat it. It provides me a lot of nutrition and energy, and it's frankly delicious. Omega-3s. So these are also in the fats. These are the fatty acids. Our pork, pasture-raised pork that's raised properly, has 3 to 4 times higher omega-3s compared to omega-6s than the conventionally grain-fed CAFO pork. What does this mean for you? This means that our fats are actually anti-inflammatory, and the conventional fats are going to cause a lot of inflammation in the body. So when people think about like why Oscar Mayer bacon is unhealthy, they're thinking about those conventional fats causing oxidative stress and inflammation in the body. They're not thinking about high omega-3 to omega-6 pasture-raised pork fat. Thiamine. This is one of my favorite nutrition elements of pork. Thiamine, also known as B1, is essential for energy metabolism in the body. And we have 1.2 milligrams per 8-ounce pork chop of thiamine. That is 100% of your recommended daily value. Zinc. We all know zinc is crucial. We'll get into some details in just a minute. 5.5 milligrams in your 8-ounce pork chop. That's 50% of your daily value. Selenium. You can get 100% of your daily value of selenium from one 8-ounce serving. That's going to be 55 micrograms. Potassium. 1,080 milligrams of potassium. That's almost a quarter of your recommended daily value from one 8-ounce pork chop. 23% to be precise. Vitamin B6. Another critical, important tool for protein metabolism and mood. You get 0.6 milligrams. That's 35% of your recommended daily value, all from this one serving. B12, we all know B12 is essential for red blood cells and nerve health. You're going to get 42% of your recommended daily value. That's 1 microgram. And vitamin D. You're going to get 60 IUs of vitamin D from eating a pork chop with the fat cap on, because vitamin D is fat soluble and pigs are able to synthesize vitamin D when they're outside in the sunlight. Now, if you want to skip the fat cap, you're going to get far fewer IUs of vitamin D, somewhere between 30 and 40 IUs. It's still going to be substantive and more than other meat sources, but it's not going to be nearly the amount of vitamin D. And when I was pregnant with Winnie last year in the winter, I got a little bit of blood work done, and my vitamin D was at a really healthy level, even though it was in the dead of winter. I fully believe that was from eating so much healthy fat from our pasture-raised pigs. Okay, we've talked a little bit about the nutrition facts and what do they mean? Why are they important? Well, something I've personally been focusing on lately, and if you've been listening to this podcast, you've heard me talk about it. I talked about it a little bit with Dr. Erin Borbet when we talked about women's health and why it matters, is women's hormones and hormone balancing. As I mentioned, I'm still nursing, so my hormones can be all over the place, and supporting healthy hormone balance is really important to me. And so many of the nutrients in pasture-raised pork are just essential for regulating hormones. I'm talking about zinc. That's critical for ovulation and for building the corpus luteum, and it helps to produce progesterone. B6, highly important for producing progesterone. If you have low progesterone levels, look at your B6. There aren't that many substantive food sources of it, and pork is a great one. Selenium, it's a powerful antioxidant. It's critical for producing the thyroid hormone, and it really supports reproductive tissues overall. You can get 100% of your recommended daily value just from eating a pork chop. And thiamine, like we talked about, it helps us turn food into energy. If you're low in B1, you're going to feel sluggish. You're going to have that midday crash. Eat more pasture-raised pork. This is awesome if you're doing a lot of resistance training and you're focusing on recovery. These nutrients, and by the way, pork also has all the essential amino acids, which are essential for recovery. All of these nutrients, the B12, the B1, the B6, the zinc, the vitamin D, all of that is going to really support you as you're recovering from your resistance training regimen. Also, if you're dealing with like mood issues or focus issues, so many of these nutrients are going to be supportive for you there. It's just under discussed when it comes to pork. And if you're listening to this and your mind is kind of blown and you're thinking like, why did no one ever tell me that pork was so healthy? Well, as I mentioned in the beginning, 99% of pork is not healthy, but it's not because of the pig itself. It's because of the conditions that we raise pigs in when we're doing factory farming, when we're buying the Oscar Mayer or the Smithfield or any of these giant pork conglomerates that are keeping their animals inside under fluorescent lights on concrete, preemptively given antibiotics, overcrowded, and being fed these just disgusting commercial feeds. That's why you're unaware of the health benefits of pork. Because if you go to your local fast food chain and get bacon, it's not going to have the health profile that I just described to you. So now the fun part. How does this relate to beef and lamb? When I first started working farmers markets, I would have so many people come up to me. They would take one look at me. They would say, I'd like some ground beef. I would say, I don't sell beef. I have pork. And they would just turn and walk away. These were people that I would guess identified as healthy eaters. They were buying lots of farm fresh products at the farmers market. They were prioritizing organic. They were eating tons of fresh fruits and vegetables, but they just didn't think that pork was a healthy meat. And now that we've talked about everything that's in pork, well, that was only part of what's in pork, but we've talked about so many of the heavy hitters of the nutrient profile that's in pork. I want to kind of compare it to you, an 8-ounce pork chop like we talked about, to an 8-ounce ribeye, grass-fed and finished, or an 8-ounce lamb chop, grass-fed and finished. So we're not going to talk about conventional farming and any of these nutrition facts, but I just want to talk about these nutrition facts across species. Because truthfully, I eat a lot of lamb and a lot of beef. I love lamb. That's why I raised sheep for several years. And I love beef, which is why we're bringing on some cattle here at the ranch. But they're not a replacement for pork, just like pork isn't a replacement for meat from ruminant animals. They all work together to create a healthy physiology for us. And it's best for us as humans to eat a wide variety of animal proteins from different sources. So let's get into it. Protein. We talked about the 51 grams in our 8-ounce pork chop. And you can compare that to an 8-ounce ribeye with 46 grams or an 8-ounce lamb chop with 45 grams. Per serving, pork has more protein. Total fat. The 12 to 15 grams in the pork chop if you're eating the fat cap versus the 36 grams of fat in the ribeye or the 42 grams of fat in the lamb chop. Believe it or not, pork is one of the leanest meats, even if you eat the fat cap. Porks are considered to be fatty and gross, but really, they aren't compared to other ruminant animals. PUFAs, those are the polyunsaturated fatty acids that, yes, exist in the natural world and occur in the natural world, but we're now eating them at like grossly higher quantities than we ever have before as a species. And so I try and avoid them wherever I can. In that 8-ounce pork chop, you have 1.5 grams of polyunsaturated fatty acids compared to 1.7 in your beef ribeye and 2.4 in your grass-fed and finished lamb chop. Thiamine, 1.2 milligrams in your pork chop, 0.05 milligrams in your ribeye and 0.15 milligrams in your lamb chop. Pork chop wins out over 10 times more than beef. Zinc. You have 5.5 milligrams in your pork chop, 4.6 in your 8-ounce ribeye, and 4.2 in your 8-ounce lamb chop. Substantially more in your pork chop. Selenium. Selenium is heads and shoulders above beef and lamb when you're looking at a comparison. You have 55 micrograms in your pork chop, 33 in your beef ribeye, and 36 in your lamb chop. Not even close. Potassium, same thing. 1,080 milligrams in your pork chop, 940 in a ribeye, 800 in a lamb chop. And lastly, vitamin D. It just blows other animal sources of vitamin D out of the water. If you're eating the pork chop with the delicious fat cap, don't deprive yourself. You're going to get 60 IUs of vitamin D compared to 15 in a ribeye or 10 in a lamb chop. For those of you who have been thinking a lot about polyunsaturated fatty acids, some of these data may be surprising to you, and I know that they were for me. So I want to take a quick moment to talk about PUFAs in pork versus beef and lamb. Why would pork have fewer PUFAs than beef or lamb who are eating and grazing their entire lives? And it's kind of a long and complicated topic. I encourage you to look into biohydrogenation. That's the process that all ruminant animals go through. They have 4 stomachs, and the grasses pass through all 4 stomachs in order to get fully metabolized. During that, the ruminant bodies produce their own polyunsaturated fatty acids. It's not really controllable by the farmer feeding the grain or the pasture or the grass or what have you. Again, these are grass-fed animals, but they're producing their own PUFA, and even if you're trying to manage them perfectly, you can't perfectly control the amount of PUFA that the ruminant is producing. Pigs, contrastingly, are monogastric. What does that mean? They have one stomach. So what they eat goes into their fat. It's why I'm passionate about not spraying glyphosate. It's why I'm passionate about no chemical fertilizers or herbicides or pesticides of any kind. It's why I'm passionate about no corn and soy, because when a pig eats that stuff, even if it's non-GMO corn and soy, it's all going to go right into their fat tissue. And I love to eat the fat for the vitamin D and the fat-soluble vitamins, but I don't want any of the yucky stuff. So what that means is that with pigs, you actually have a lot of control over the level of PUFA that they're storing in their fat because of their stomachs, because they're monogastric. So that's how we know that there's lower PUFA in pork. Per 8-ounce serving, like we talked about, there's actually so much more fat in a ribeye or in a lamb chop. And when you multiply that by the existing PUFA, that's how you get that disparity between a pork chop being lower PUFA than a ribeye being higher PUFA per 8 ounces. Ethical and environmental benefits. We've talked a lot on this podcast about the benefits of rotational grazing and true pasture management. And pigs, they serve a specific purpose. Cows and lambs are sometimes considered true grazers. Sheep less so, but cows certainly. And they're going to act more like a lawnmower. Whereas pigs can root around in the soil. They don't only chomp down on the fresh growth. They'll eat different parts of grasses. They'll eat forbs. They'll eat dead tree stumps. They'll eat earthworms. They'll eat all kinds of things in the pasture, and they serve a different purpose. When they're managed properly and they're moved regularly, you can prevent pigs from doing damage. Although if you want to use pigs instead of rototillers to rip out a weedy spot of your pasture or resow some grass, you can do that in targeted grazing, but they're going to eat different parts of the plants than, say, a sheep or a cow or a goat or a chicken. So they're important. The savanna, the natural grassland that we see on planet Earth, is always populated with many species. We don't see mono-species grazing in a healthy savanna. So pigs are part of that. Pigs have their own role in a healthy grazing cycle. Additionally, it can break up parasite cycles. So if you're only running one animal, let's say you're only running cows over a pasture year after year, you can develop some parasite presence there. It's helpful to run pigs as well as chickens, as well as other ruminant species to diversify the manure in the pasture and to break up parasite cycles. And yes, the manure. The manure is so nutrient dense: nitrogen, phosphorus, organic matter. And when it's managed properly, it improves soil structure, boosts microbial life, and contributes to long-term fertility and water retention. The operative phrase being managed properly. Not everyone is managing their pigs on pasture properly, but we really do our best here. We're always learning. It's wet and rainy out there today, which requires a little bit more of a soft touch, and we're far from perfect. But when you use pigs to the best of your ability and you're working with the harmony of the system, there's so much good to be had with pigs in a grazing system. If you're not already convinced, go to latebloomerranch.com, learn more. But if you are already convinced, go to latebloomerranch.com, check out our bloom boxes. We have so much delicious pork for sale, and we're adding to it all the time. If you're lucky enough to live somewhere with a wonderful local farm scene and you have access to premium quality pork where you live, I encourage you to get out there, talk to your local farmer, and buy some pork from them as well. Ask them a few critical questions. Make sure they're pasture raised and ask them what that means to them. Some people say pasture raised, and what they really mean is that these pigs live outside in a dry lot. The pasture hasn't grown for years. They don't rotate. They don't resow. They aren't looking at the pasture as a legitimate source of nutrition for the pigs. So ask that first off. Then, if they're pasture raised, or if they say that they're regenerative even, ask them about the kinds of foods and forbs that they're feeding. Ask them how they're managing their pasture. You want to be sure that you're not going to be eating pork that's been exposed to herbicides, pesticides, tons of pharmaceutical products, growth hormones, etc., because all of that is going to end up in the fat. It's also going to be harsher on the pigs and harsher on the landscape. If they say the word regenerative, ask them what they're doing to regenerate their soil and how they measure that. Make sure that they live outside year-round, that the pigs are outside year-round, because it's a huge red flag if someone is pasture raising them, but they're spending most of their time indoors in a barn. In terms of signs of quality, there are a few visual cues that we can look at. Darker meat. You don't want that pale pinkish gray meat. You want like a really rich pink, or I would say even red meat. A lot of our pork is a really dark red. It even kind of looks like beef. That's going to show that there's like a lot of nutrition there that's coming from heritage breeds. Similarly, you want the fat to be like white or ivory. You don't want a yellowish fat, and you want the fat to be firm to the touch, like almost like beef fat. That's going to tell you that it's more monounsaturated fats instead of the polyunsaturated fats. And when it cooks, it should have a clean smell. You don't want to feel like you're in a deep fryer at like a burger joint. You want to feel this clean, nutty, sweet fat. And it's going to cook a lot better, and it's not going to be as greasy and as smoky. So to conclude, not all pork is the same. The pork that we're talking about today is the pork that is raised properly, and that pork is a nutritional powerhouse. That's what you want to be eating. I recommend getting it in once or twice a week for dinner, a real serving size, 6 to 8 ounces minimum. You're going to get so many nutritional milestones from that. And you can even go and eat more pork than that. I like to eat pork at breakfast too. We'll make breakfast sausage out of my primal ground pork. If you're confused about what that is, please go back and listen to my episode about organ meats. But I like to start my day and end my day with these really powerful stores of nutrition. And it's especially powerful for women who are in seasons where you might be feeling a little bit depleted. Like I know for me, nursing a baby, I need all the extra nutrition I can get, and I need that zinc, I need that thiamine, I need the B6 and the B12 to make me feel ready to tackle my day and excited about life. Like it's so mood supporting. And every single time that you buy pork like this, think about the farms that you're keeping in business that are keeping farmland, that are keeping animals on the landscape. It's a powerful market signal that you're able to send that keeps happy pigs out there in their family and social units, in the sunshine, making vitamin D. It's just a beautiful process that we all get to be a part of, and you get to do it today by voting with your dollar. So if this episode shifted how you think about pork, send it to someone who you know cares about their health, but never eats pork, who thinks it's dirty, who thinks it's full of parasites or chemicals or all these inflammatory fats. Send that person this episode and buy them a pork chop. Share a meal with them. We can make this change together. So again, if you'd like to learn more about Late Bloomer Ranch, what we do, why we do it, go to my website, latebloomerranch.com, or drop me a line, hello@Late Bloomer Ranch. I love hearing from you. I love hearing your feedback. And I look forward to seeing what you cook up. Tag me in your meals on social media @Late Bloomer Ranch. Okay, until next time, happy eating.